We have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, we're flattening the curve on government oppression and tyranny. This is Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. Vicky Davis is here as well. It is the 2nd of May, 2020, as we get right back into documenting the crisis of our republic and the crisis of the various states in the Union. Hey, good morning, Vicky.
Good morning.
Well, we're flying by the seat of our pants this morning, I'll tell you what.
We normally do that, but this morning is particularly bad.
Yeah, it was very bad. Just moments ago, I was out in the barn trying to fish coffee cups out of the building. I needed coffee creamer. So I went out there.
Yeah, well, that's kind of an emergency. I can see that.
Well, I just didn't want to go the entire 3 hours without it. And the problem is I got way too close to showtime, and I'm out there doing that, and then there's other emergencies brewing, which I'm not at liberty to talk about right now because they involve very sensitive stuff. And I could tell you off the air, but I can't really say anything on the air about it. So anyway, that's the way things are right now. Things are just topsy-turvy here in the Weeks household at the moment.
Yeah, up until the very last second when you called, I was listening to a debate, one of the old debates between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton.
Oh, jeez.
As I was working on
you really are
formatting a report, and so I was kind of like in my own little world. And
yeah, you're a glutton for punishment if you're going back down that kind of memory lane.
Well, it wasn't intentional. It just came on the YouTube.
Oh, I see.
Sometimes the YouTube just rolls,
right. I hate
one after the other, and I just listened. So
yeah, I hate that auto feature myself. I really wish they just quit putting up videos that I don't necessarily want to see.
Well, I like it if it's something that is interesting. I hate it if it's something horrible. And then I have to find the window. And I always have, 50 windows open. So I have to find it to shut it off.
So, yeah, we ended up having another protest. And I'll get to that in a moment because that was very, very interesting. And not just for what happened there. What happened there was very inspiring, but also what the aftermath of it, the reaction to it. A lot of lies are being told. Let's suffice that to say, both by the media and by people leftists who are hoping to be politically expedient by this. So I'll circle around to that in a moment. I don't know. The COVID-19 thing has seemed to have sucked all the air out of the room. You can't really talk about anything today because literally, I mean, with everything being locked down, and of course they're getting ready to open up certain states, but only to a certain extent, Vicky. We're not going to get it all back because they've already told us we're not going to get it all back. Everything's never really going to go back to normal, and that's really the same thing that they told us after 9/11, isn't it? Things are forever going to be changed. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. But 9/11 didn't really direct us in the same way that this COVID-19 is, at least not directly and not immediately. I mean, this is overtly in-your-face totalitarian governance. I'm not even sure that our governors are in control. I'm not sure who is in control of this country.
I was thinking the same thing, and I think you're absolutely right. They're all getting their orders from somewhere.
Yeah.
And they seem very, very dogmatic about it. At least ours does.
Well, and I heard Steve Bannon talk about Henry Kissinger, and he used the term condominium. And I know we've talked about this before, but the idea of condominium under international law is like two
different entities controlling the same territory, right?
In control of the same territory. And I'm kind of thinking, and so I've listened to a lot of Kissinger videos, and it's very painful, but listening to him. But in one of them, he was talking about China and how China has never really recognized the concept of the nation state under the what? Under the Westphalian system of nation states.
Okay.
Where a nation state is defined by geographic boundaries and, have their own culture and everything. Whoever rules a nation state has total rule over the nation state.
Right.
But apparently China has never recognized the Westphalian system, which kind of explains a lot, actually. And so this past week or so, I spent quite a bit of time on Kissinger, because I want quotes, from Kissinger on the subject.
Yeah. Well, since you mentioned Steve Bannon, why don't we start there? I got an audio clip from Steve Bannon. For people who think that Steve Bannon is a great patriotic guy, he's supporting the lockdowns. Absolutely, he's all in, Vicky. So I just, listen to what he has to say here.
We have to go to a Wuhan model, whether we like it or not, and that means a hard shutdown today. Lock it down, the whole thing. Lock it down and quarantine, I think, New York City and maybe New Orleans, okay? Lock that down hard.
So he's all in. He's all in favor.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I wonder if he's invested in Big Pharma.
That's a good question. But for whatever reason, he definitely wants to promote the agenda that the establishment is promoting. And then there are other people, many of whom I highly respect or have highly respected up until now. Lee Stranahan being one of them. I never would have thought Lee Stranahan would go along with the narrative the way he has. And he's taken a lot of heat, as I think it's well-deserved heat. He claims, I just don't want the virus to spread. But Stranahan is smarter than that. Stranahan is smart enough to figure out these statistics we're being given are cooked. That's very clear. That CDC document proves the death certificates are cooked. And the rest of it, I mean, when you got a monetary incentive, and some of this is anecdotal with regard to the case numbers, and some of it's not. But, Vicky, I'm seeing everywhere people talking about how their loved one with either died or was claimed to have had COVID-19 when it wasn't. I mean, it's all over the place now. Even funeral directors. Project Veritas was talking to the funeral directors. They're saying, and he didn't just talk to one or two. He talked to a bunch of them, and they're saying that they're not buying it. They believe it's all being cooked. They talk to families all the time. Funeral directors do. And
of course.
So something's really wrong here. And for people who are supposedly very, very good investigative journalists to not see this, I just don't understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. And also you said that Steve Bannon said New York and New Orleans. And but a map that I saw of COVID, now I don't know if it was deaths. I don't remember whether it was deaths or infections, but Texas was, solid color.
Solid COVID.
With the number of cases. So I don't know. I don't know. It's very strange. I think one thing we do know for sure is that they are using it as an opportunity for conditioning for a totalitarian system.
Oh, absolutely. And I think they have every intention of implementing the totalitarian system. Before we get into all that, though, I want to get into this Carnegie Endowment for International Peace panel discussion, and we'll circle back around to some of the other stuff like that we started the show with, the protest here in Michigan, the protests other places. I would like to get into some of that as well today. And there's a little bit of political news, too, even though I hate doing political news since it's not being widely talked about or hasn't been up to this point. I want to touch upon it at least as briefly as we can. But you found the panel discussion from the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. They were talking about the strengths and weaknesses of Trump's foreign policy agenda. From their standpoint, whether or not you agree with the Trump administration or Trump himself and the way he's handled things, his rise is a result of a populist rebellion against the failed policies of globalization. What's fascinating about this discussion is watching this Colin Dweck. He's a professor at George Mason University and the author of the book Age of Iron. He's explaining American populism and the rise of Trump to these globalists at the Carnegie Endowment. And what's interesting is that obviously they don't understand. It's so easy for them to live in their ivory tower. They're so entrenched, so steep in one worldism. They can't possibly understand why anyone would want globalism. Imagine that.
Well, and you know what I keep seeing, I've been working on the Clinton administration policies that they implemented, and it is so striking that the policies that they were implementing, they know the fact that this is going to hurt this segment of the population, but they think it's perfectly acceptable to do that. Right. It's like, I don't like the neighbor across the street, so I'm going to shoot 3 of them. The rest of them will survive, but that's okay. We'll have peace and harmony in the neighborhood.
Collateral damage.
Yeah,
collateral damage. That's exactly how they operate. Everything is collateral damage.
Your life is collateral damage. Sorry.
Well, they're the ones that get to survive, and everybody else is collateral damage. Mm-hmm. That's the way this plutocracy works. Anyway, they start off talking about the founders, ironically, and their idea of populism and how things began to change under Woodrow Wilson.
And what I argue is that American nationalism, there is a kind of American foreign policy nationalism going back to the founding, which is not undemocratic at all. It's quite the opposite. In the American case, at least, there is a civic nationalism, which involves an American creed with powerful classical liberal elements, rule of law, limited government, popular sovereignty. And that has been bound up with an American sense of nationalism from the beginning. So in a sense, small c conservatives from the beginning have sought to conserve, literally, that tradition. And at the same time, when it comes to foreign policy, the founders had a couple of key principles that were really a consistent paradigm for generations. One, if you have a dollar bill in your pocket, you can see the idea of a new order of the ages. The idea being that the United States will stand for something, that it will hope that popular self-government spreads. That is a distinctly American hope going back to the founding. That's been an element of U.S. foreign policy nationalism. That doesn't mean you can always do it by force, but at least as an example. But the second element, and this is in Washington's farewell address, is the idea that you maintain a free hand, that there is, as Jefferson put it later, that there will be no entangling alliances, no permanent alliances. That was a key element in American foreign policy nationalism from the beginning. And the founders saw no contradiction between those two things, right? That was really a dominant, what we would call bipartisan tradition well into the 20th century. What really shifted was, I argue, Woodrow Wilson's innovation during World War I. Wilson believed not only that you needed to tie a new foreign policy paradigm, what we call today liberal internationalism or globalism, you needed to tie that to the possibility of domestic progressive reforms in every country, including the United States. You need to be willing to intervene on the ground militarily in Europe to vindicate democracy overseas, but you also need to be willing to make global binding multilateral commitments worldwide, as he intended with the League of Nations, particularly under Article 10. So that's a paradigm shift. That's an alternative to the founders, and Wilson understood it as such, and so did his Republican critics, which is what gave them pause.
Okay, so he goes on to define the definitions in the American conservative movement. So these are the divisions, I guess you'd say, within the right wing, essentially.
Now, from the beginning, there have been internal divisions and debates. And I say there's three main groups of conservatives over time, over the past century. One, conservative internationalists are skeptical of some of the Wilsonian overkill when it comes to multilateral commitments, but they basically believe that you should have alliances overseas, a robust American presence, and active role overseas. Then there's a second group on the other end of the spectrum who are strict non-interventionists, and you see this to the present day with, for example, libertarians, some paleoconservatives who say that actually the U.S. should really avoid military commitments altogether. Alliances, bases, interventions, right? It can trade peacefully with other countries, but it shouldn't have a military role outside of, let's say, the Western Hemisphere. And then there's a third string, kind of in the middle, which is a hawkish or hardline unilateralism, which doesn't get as much attention in elite discourse. I would say it's been underrepresented. But a lot of conservatives over time actually have had a fairly strong willingness to spend on the military, willing to counter, concrete adversaries, the Soviet Union, Al-Qaeda, but they're unenthusiastic about broader liberal internationalist projects. And if you can't convince them that there is some enemy that actually requires a response, they tend to shy away from a more active role. That's the pivotal group, actually, over time. And what you see is that they pivot back and forth between activism and disengagement, depending on the circumstances. So in that moment of the treaty debate, all three factions agreed that Wilson was wrong, but they didn't agree exactly why. In the 20s and 30s, conservatives, for the most part, agreed the U.S. should be detached from military affairs in Europe, right? Pearl Harbor settled that debate for some time, and then, of course, the rise of the Soviet Union led many hardline conservatives to support a more robust military role for the overseas. But if you think back to somebody like a Senator Barry Goldwater, he actually was not enthusiastic at all about liberal internationalism as such, right? The reason most conservatives supported this was they were anti-communist, staunchly anti-communist. So then the collapse of the Soviet Union, as welcome as it was, led to the question of what now for conservatives. In the 90s, I think it was wide open. You had Pat Buchanan, you had Ron Paul, you also had conservative internationalists, you had sort of everything in between. George W. Bush settled that debate for some time with the concept of a war on terror, and I think most Republicans supported him in that for much of his administration. But once Bush leaves office, during the Obama years, you're back to that period where conservatives are again asking, what now?
Any thoughts so far?
Yeah, I'm struck by the thought that they think they know, he thinks he knows what we think out here. And I don't think he understands anywhere outside of the Beltway at all.
He himself is in the ivory tower.
Yeah. Our biggest problem, I think that whatever opinions that the American people might have are skewed by the information that they get.
Yeah, good point.
And we know that our media has been lying to us overtly.
Absolutely.
I mean, for a long time, and I think they were deceptive before that. I noticed that it really started getting bad after 9/11. So the American people get is really, it's not the truth about things, has no context outside of yesterday's news, and we are history deficient.
Yeah, that's true. All true. Yeah, I was just talking to, I won't say who, but it was somebody very, very close, to the family yesterday. And, well, I can say it was a family member. And this person is elderly and is very, very, doesn't have internet access, wouldn't know how to use it if they did, But they've been listening to all of this propaganda on the news, and it's just scaring the hell out of them. And they're believing everything that the media is saying. And I told them, I said, look, and I might have, I wish, I probably got a little more belligerent than I probably should have. But I said, you got to turn the thing off. Turn it off. Your problem is that you're listening to propaganda. I said, you're just listening to, they lie constantly. But, the problem is a few moments conversation, and this person is a person that I had given that CDC document to. I said, look, I gave you the documentation proving that that they were lying about the statistics. But it's just, they're still, worried, be careful, don't go. And I went to the Capitol, and I saw the elderly couple there. Jessica was with me, my daughter. And, I was almost ready to walk past. I wasn't aware that the couple had spoken to us. And Jessica pointed it out to me, and so I turned around, and they were asking what was passed and what wasn't, because we had our protest at the time that they were trying to decide on what bills to pass, whether or not to extend Gretchin-Whitmer's emergency powers. I'm happy to report that they did vote that down, although the stay-home order is separate from the emergency powers. She's using some law somewhere, so that's going to continue. Anyway, without getting deep into the weeds on that, I was explaining to them to the best of what I could understand of what just happened, because there was some controversy about certain aspects of it. And finally, I was getting ready to walk away, and the woman told me, she says, "You guys really should be wearing a mask." And I says, "Look, I got a good, strong immune system. I'll be okay." But it's astounding to me how people are just caught in this, where they're scared of people. And Vicky, I'm afraid. I'm really afraid that they are doing permanent damage to the American psyche. Well, really the world psyche, because this is worldwide now. Trump says it's like 180-something countries. Well, I think we only have like 190-something. So it's most of the world is being manipulated this way. And I'm not saying there's no virus. I'm not saying that. I do believe there is a virus. The problem is you don't know. I think, given everything that we know now, how many people who have actually had it versus how many people maybe they thought had it, this thing has turned out, casualty-wise, to be a tempest in a teapot. To be quite honest about it, it's and people would push back against me, and say, "Oh, well, what about all these places that have been overrun?" There have been a lot of places, a lot of hospitals that have been overrun by the seasonal flu in the past. And people could say, well, this is different. Well, it may be different, but that's just because we don't know about it. And I do believe it was a bioweapon. So other people can say it wasn't. That's just my opinion. I'm not an epidemiologist, but I have a problem with the manipulation. I have a problem with the mind control that's being pushed out every day to do one thing, and that's fear. I've used the analogy, the metaphor before. When you're in the car and a wild animal has the misfortune of haphazardly running out in front of your car, okay, that wild animal knows you're bearing down on it, and it's got seconds to make a decision, and it goes one way, and then that might not be the right way, so it changes directions, goes the other way. See, it's the fight or flight mentality that's being kicked in at that point. It's not thinking logically, and it inevitably you hear the thud underneath your tire as you hit this thing. Okay, that's what they want to invoke in the population. This fight or flight mentality, where you're not thinking logically. It goes down to your base mentality. Basically, you're operating on nothing more than instinct, and instinctive decisions often are not the right ones. They're not well thought out.
Well, when we do, I hear the music.
Yeah.
When we get back from the break, I have a comment on that.
Okay.
That whole thing. So.
Very good. All right. Very good. We'll take the bottom of the hour break. We'll continue, folks. We're just getting started. Stay with us. More from the Carnegie Endowment for Peace. Oh boy, don't we all want peace? We're going to get into that a little more, and then I've got some other stuff about Trump, and it's unfortunately not good. We also have some information about cryptocurrencies that are being developed for world governance. Stay with us. We'll be back.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're back. The website for the show. This is Govern America, by the way. GovernAmerica.com. That's GovernAmerica.com. My email address, radio@GovernAmerica.com. Vicky, you want to go give your information out, please?
Yeah, my website is the technocratictyranny.com. That's the newer one. The older one is channelingreality.com, and they're both linked to you, so you can get from one to the other. My email address is eyeswideoopen@channelingreality.com.
All right, very good. You said you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yeah, I was listening to, I think it was, is it Deborah Birx?
Yeah, she's the one of the team. One of the team.
Yeah.
The
I
team
think
of
it
trouble.
was her. Anyway, she was talking about this being an opportunity to establish a real public health system. And I started thinking about that. Okay, we have our health care system. That's the doctors, the nurses, the hospitals, and we have public health. So what does public health do? They are the ones that are the keepers of the statistics. So boiling it down to the essence, they are the information systems.
Yeah.
So they would have been the ones, because doctors were prohibited and hospitals were prohibited from sharing patient information unless they had a signed release. So I think when they started nationalizing people's medical records, it was probably a push from the public health side, the public health system. Now the problem is that they are privatized. I mean, we do have a uniformed force that is in Washington, D.C. that nobody ever sees or, except, when they do their TV spots. But basically they are the information collectors and distributors. So they would be the ones to push for the open medical records for their purposes. Okay, since they're very tied with NIH, National Institutes of Health, it's like the marriage made in hell. You have the researchers who would like to have everybody as a lab rat, and then you have the information people, the systems people, who want to gather information on everybody. It's a perfect match made in hell. And so I think they've teamed up in this COVID virus thing. You know, whether true or not, it exists. People may die from it, but it presented an opportunity to them.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. I can tell you that. I'm very troubled by the way all these cogs are fitting together to form this ugly totalitarian technocratic system. It's very clear. After they're done piecing this whole thing together, nobody is going to have any ability to do anything. I mean, the way it is coming together, the level of control, and what I get into here in a moment, everyone's going to see the level of control that they have in mind. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I want to finish this Carnegie thing first, because there is a punchline to this as well. They make an admission in here, a statement in here that I don't know if you picked up on it, but I sure did. It's easy for it to fly by you if you're not paying real close attention, but it does speak to how they think. And anyway, this guy starts off. He continues to focus rather on the rise of Trump in the historical context.
The big surprise, in my opinion, of 2015, 2016, in the Republican primary was that a candidate could win the Republican nomination, and in fact the presidency, campaigning against that conservative internationalist tradition going back to the 40s. I mean, Donald Trump really led a frontal assault on the conservative internationalist tradition going back decades, and he won, which was astonishing. He sort of turned things upside down. So groups that had been marginalized felt they were better represented. Groups that had been in charge were deeply concerned.
Threatened.
Right? But I think what Trump was doing in a way, and I'm not suggesting that he personally read these older documents, okay, that's not my argument. My suggestion is that he instinctively is a kind of American nationalist who draws from older traditions, the idea that you need to maintain a free hand, for example. Now, when Trump ran for president, he had a particular American nationalism of his own. And if you go back, you can see he said the same sort of thing for 30 years.
Okay, now what he says right there is true. And this is where I do think Trump does have some principles. If you go back to decades before he ran, his message really has been fairly consistent, Vicky. And that's what's fascinating about it. He has been fairly consistent, and so I think on some levels Trump is sincere, and that's what's confusing about the whole thing, is that I think he came into office with some ideas on certain things he wants to change, and I think he does think, well, you know, then this guy will mention it in a minute, about how Trump has been going on and on about how America's being taken advantage of. I mean, that has been a constant theme, and he's continually hammered that issue. But the problem is that some of the things that his administration has borne out indicates either some sort of a compromise, or he hasn't really been aware of what his own policy is doing, which is hard to believe, really, or maybe he thinks that this is a change for the. I don't know. That's what the confusing part is this whole idea that he has been that's what is coming out of his administration now is somehow consistent with a solution that is being put into place to a problem that he outlined decades before he was ever even considering running. It's bizarre.
I think he has a conflict of interest that he probably struggles with. I think he does believe in globalization, but I think he thinks that our trade people signed the worst possible deals, which they did. So apparently he is of the mind that you can fix those deals and globalization will be great and everybody will spur from it. Now, my personal opinion is I don't think so. I am greatly offended by the transfer of American sovereignty to international organizations. And I do not think that our government, as a government, can maintain control. I think it is a crumbling nation state, and it's because of the way they separated. Our economy was globalized, but our political system was not. Of course, not.
Yeah.
Because they have to maintain the facade that we actually have an American government, even though they have been transferring sovereignty to international organizations since 1990.
Yeah.
Or, perhaps before that if you consider Mexico and Canada. So I think he's got a conflict. On the one hand, he makes money from globalization. On the other hand, he is an American nationalist.
Right.
So,
yeah, he's definitely a puzzle, and I don't think we'll ever really fully understand what makes him tick. I guess that's the thing, and I think to a certain degree he likes it that way. Anyway, continuing.
His own unusual way, 30 or 35 years actually. He said over and over again that he viewed U.S. allies as free riders. That's his view. Primarily as free riders rather than assets. That's not my view, it's his view. He was actually quite consistent about that. He said that they were taking advantage of the United States economically and taking advantage of the United States militarily and politically. And he aimed to somehow fix this through his own negotiating skills. It was a complaint. It wasn't really a plan. There wasn't much sense of what is the policy alternative, but it was a complaint with some popular resonance, as we saw in the 2016 primary, particularly when you tie it into frustration over military interventions in Iraq and Afghanistan, not to mention Libya, frustrations with patterns of economic globalization that seem to benefit the well-off and China's middle class as opposed to working Americans, frustrations over cessions of national sovereignty to supranational organizations, right? He bundled together a sense of frustration and turned it into a winning platform. So it's an older version of American nationalism, his own particular version, that I think we've seen resurgent. And that's part of the historical context.
The nice thing about this is you don't hear any mention of the word Russians. The establishment media has to explain away the rise of Trump populism, and I'll call it that, even though this guy points out that the populism really started prior to Trump. I mean, what's amazing about this whole thing is you got a bunch of globalists sitting around talking about how Trump could have got elected, how this could have happened. And what they don't understand is it represents a rejection, or maybe they do understand. I think they kind of do. But only to a certain extent. And
intellectually they understand it, but they don't understand it in the heart.
Well, they don't want to understand it because they got a huge stake in continuing with the policy. And they're going to do everything they can to push this along. So what they're trying to figure out is how bad the damage is. And what they're not getting is there's a reason why people have rejected globalism. There's a reason why people don't want to go down this road is because it's cost the average person dearly. Dearly. I mean, NAFTA was nothing to shake a stick at.
Including their own life, a guy that supported his family his whole life, the factory moves to China or Mexico, he can't get another job, he commits suicide. That's not an uncommon story. Globalization has devastated a significant percentage of the American people.
Yeah, and now they're working to finish off the devastation. It's called the pandemic. And Bill Gates is promising pandemic number 2. He's already talking about pandemic 2. This isn't going to be the last one. There's going to be another one, and it's probably going to be right around the corner. Yeah.
Well, and you have all of these rich, empowered, super empowered people that meet in Davos, and they have just obscene amounts of wealth, and they're talking about the poor people.
Yeah.
How they're going to help the poor people. I don't think they help anybody but themselves, actually.
How can we fix them millennial development goals where we eradicate poverty? What year was it they wanted to eradicate poverty?
2000. And those millennium development goals are still in effect. See, these initiatives, I don't know if people think they go away or not, but they don't go away. They just keep building on them and building on them. And so they've built this international monster of a machine that and they can, UN organizations can come and operate in our country with immunity. And how do they expect nation states not to collapse?
Yeah.
In view of all of this. Now, I don't know.
I think that's the goal. That's the goal.
I think it is the goal.
There's no question it's the goal. They want to eradicate. You can't have a one world government with nation states and borders in the way. I mean, they're certainly doing a good job of doing cross-border cooperation and regionalism and all this other stuff. But what that is an elimination of borders, essentially. I mean,
right.
You might still have the signs posted. Go ahead.
Right. Well, that's where the idea with China comes in, and Kissinger. China apparently was more like an empire than a nation state, which is why they would invade other countries. And as Steve Bannon explained, the countries that they invade and take over become tributary states with, I assume that means all of the wealth and power goes to Beijing. Mm-hmm. So the internationalists, if I'm right about that, I have to do more research on Kissinger, but if that's the idea, then what that means is that Europe, the United States, and all of the Americas, the idea of the internationalists is to have a system of empires, not nation states. And the idea to do that, they would have to collapse the nation states and destroy the nation state system, and then have the condominium kind of governing structure at the international level.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyway, continuing with the analysis of Trump's foreign policy.
In reality, the Trump foreign policy is more of a mixture of non-intervention, hardline unilateralism, and in some ways actually continued U.S. foreign policy activism and engagement. It's a mixture. It's a hybrid. That's partly because of personnel around him, right? That's partly because of his own adaptations over time. He's very flexible to a fault. He's unpredictable day to day. But there does seem to be, to me, a pattern in how he handles foreign policy. He launches pressure campaigns against allies as well as adversaries. He launches pressure campaigns on economic issues as well as security ones. So in other words, pressure campaigns against security adversaries, North Korea, Iran, ISIS, Taliban, that's pretty straightforward. Then you see pressure campaigns against U.S. allies on security to increase defense spending. Not entirely new, but he is blunt in a way that we haven't seen before. You see pressure campaigns on the economic front against China, U.S. competitor. That's a Trump innovation, I think. I mean, that was not nearly as high a priority for previous presidents, to really push China on the commercial side. And then finally, temperature campaigns against U.S. allies on trade. That's new. And that's very Trump. That's Trumpish. I don't think any other candidate would have done that. And what he does is he goes up and down the ladder of escalation in ways that can be quite sudden and unexpected. He will raise the temperature, and then he will lower it. He will make threats, and then he will be willing to settle or talk to almost anybody. This tends to unnerve people. It unnerves allies, it unnerves adversaries, it unnerves probably even some of his own staff. It's not obvious that he himself knows the end point, which is interesting. I'm not sure he himself knows his own reservation point on every one of these fronts. He keeps his options open. That is different from saying that he is hell-bent on dismantling what we call rules-based liberal international order. I'm not convinced that he actually has that as a reference point one way or the other. He is interested in renegotiating existing arrangements consistent with his 2016 campaign promises. It is a kind of portfolio assessment of U.S. commitments overseas, commercial, diplomatic, military. He's reserving the right to either walk away from some commitments, renegotiate others, maintain some, maybe even bolster some, right? There are U.S. troops in Poland more than there were under Obama. So the outcome is not predetermined. A significant amount of the U.S. forward presence is still there and may, in some cases, even be increased. And that seems to be the foreign policy. I do think there's been a long-term shift whereby the Republican Party has become more populist, culturally conservative. White working class voters have become more and more important over time as the base of the party. That is going to have an effect on your foreign policy, including your trade policy. There is no getting around it. And he is as much a symptom as a cause. He has accelerated that, but he also represents long-term shifts. Right? So I would not assume that just because he exits the scene that these long-term shifts disappear. We can't assume that he's just a one-off and that as soon as he's gone, everything will snap back to 2014. Some of these long-term shifts are real. They predate Trump and they will probably outlast him. So one way or another, I guess my conclusion would be that conservative American nationalism is here to stay.
So that last part especially is my, I envision, here's the damage control, guys. Here's what you have to worry about. And long-term populism is here to stay. Nationalism is here to stay. You're going to have to deal with this, and it's not just a Trump problem, because it's not just something that Trump caused, but in fact, and I think that's an assumption with a lot of these globalists, is that along came Trump and threw him for the loop, and if they could just ever get rid of him, then all of this populism and all this nationalism will just die away. But there's a reason why people have rejected these policies, as we pointed out. This is costing everybody dearly, not only in financial terms, but also in freedom terms. I mean, when they're flooding your country with foreigners that are taking away your job and transforming your nation into a multicultural, the word cesspool comes to mind, because the problem is when you bring in people who don't share your values and you flood your society with people who don't even speak your language and are nothing like you, then, I mean, it's not xenophobic. I mean, I have no problem with people if they're willing to adapt and adopt our ways. The problem is they're not. And in many respects, they're hostile to what our country was founded upon. They don't understand it. They don't want to understand it. And they're not being made to understand it. And when you've got a system like that long enough, you have the potential of having a civil war. And I think that's exactly what would benefit. I think they kind of want a civil war.
Well, I think it's kind of might be inevitable if they keep flooding our country with foreigners, because we will have to fight to keep our way of life. Now, what I object to with all the flooding in of people that they are importing, trying to create diversity, is that the cost of the schools keeps going up. The cost of infrastructure keeps going up. All the costs keep going up, and But the wages keep going down because they're importing people from, that are really not economically viable. They've got to be subsidized and taken care of, and with health care. And it really offends me, that
sure.
They can get health care, but I can't,
Mm-hmm. Well, they're bringing in the labor, and they're also outsourcing the jobs. So it's like you coined the term crisscross, double cross. It's a double whammy. They're doing it from both directions, exporting jobs and importing labor. And
yes.
And it's not just the lower classes, by the way. It's doctors. You're hard pressed to find any doctor that was actually born in the United States that are actually working in the United States.
Right, and I don't care
sad.
whether people like it or not, but I do not want a foreign doctor. Period. I don't want a foreign doctor. I want an American doctor. And so, because I don't know what training they get in foreign countries. I that's it. I just don't want a foreign doctor. And so all of that offends me. But what he was saying, that he thinks all of this started with Trump, he's wrong. Because I know that a lot of people have been working on trying to figure out what went wrong with our economy. And they did end up, like I did, ending up at the trade agreements, but they are agreements to create these international institutions to which our sovereignty is being transferred.
Yeah, I'll tell you what.
So anything that they put under the category of trade, I consider it a treason agreement.
Yeah.
It's not trade. It's not about trade. And they can say that it's a rules-based system, harmonizing laws and whatever.
Yeah.
But with that harmonization are open borders for those products and people, by the way, free movement of goods and services, which is people.
Yeah, human resources, human capital.
Right, exactly.
Okay, we got the breaks. Let's go ahead and take top of the hour break. Stay with us, folks. Hour number 2 of Govern America is straight ahead. Don't go away.
Have before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order.
This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is hour number 2 of Govern America. It is the 2nd of May, 2020, as we continue along here, talking about this Carnegie Endowment for International Peace hearing. There's one more clip I have from the hearing, and this really represents the punchline of this whole hearing. I think people need to pay attention to what this lady says. I'm aware we have a caller on the line. Just hang with me a moment, caller, and we'll get to you as quickly as possible. But just a lot of things to talk about, and I wanted to get to this hearing because we've had it for a little while, and without, again, with all the COVID-19 stuff sucking all the air out of the room, it's hard to talk about other things. But other things, and the important topic of globalization, it certainly isn't going away, that's for sure. But this is a Daniel Pletka. She is a senior fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, and I think it's very, very interesting what she has to say about the American people.
But we started this project, and one of the things we looked at was polling over the years about American public interest in global engagement. And what you see is a very, very cyclical engagement, interest drop. And if you go back to pretty much every presidential campaign, let's just pick we can pick this century, we can go back even further to Bill Clinton. Every single one of these campaigns, Republican and Democrat, has been about turning inwards. It's the economy, stupid. Oh, George W. Bush, you were stupid. The Gulf War, that was dumb. And we can go on and on. Nation building here at home. Nation building here at home was Barack Obama's slogan, but it could have easily have been Donald Trump's. And of course, in each instance, what we find is they run on these slogans. Everybody's like, oh my God, it's terrible. America's turning inward. And then, of course, we end up, as a Middle East specialist, I tend to focus
Now, let me just stop it there, pause it just for a moment. Notice how she said everybody says, oh my God, it's terrible. America's turning inward. Yeah, everybody in her circle is saying that because that's the only people she ever talks to are globalists.
That's right. On my area of the world, we end up entangled in some sort of conflict in the Middle East. And Donald Trump has been no different. Okay? No different than that. I think that the other point to make that I think Colin rightly describes is that the American public's views on these things are fairly constant. Right? The only thing that really changes is interest and engagement on particular issues. So, for example, do the American people think it's great to be in Afghanistan in that long-running and obviously not hugely successful war? Very low numbers of support, okay? But during the Obama administration, when Obama decided that we needed to plus up troops just as we were drawing down troops in Iraq, he went out and he gave what for him was a relatively rare speech, compared certainly to George W. Bush, relatively rare speech talking about the importance of this. And the numbers went right back up again. Okay. The American people are game to be led. Okay. Ironically, that's true in most democracies, right? They want their leaders to make a persuasive case to them. And when they make a persuasive case, whether it is for engagement, greater engagement, military commitment, economic commitment, or they make a case for disengagement, moving away, nation building here at home, avoiding foreign entanglements, whatever cliche they choose for the moment, the public reacts to that as well. And that, I would not call that a fickleness on the part of the public. I would more call that a general, normal lack of interest in the day-to-day of national security. I always try to underscore that we here in Washington are weird. Okay? We pay a lot of attention to this. Most people don't. Okay? And that's just the reality. And by the way, that's not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. Leave government to those of us in the globalism camp. We'd be happy to fill the void. Isn't it interesting, though? She said the American people are game to be led. Game to be led, Vicky.
Yeah. Well, what she's missing is that during this last 19 years since 9/11, there has been the rise of the alternative news that is giving the American people information that they never had before, and thoughts and ideas that they never had before. And so I think that the public is gaining a better understanding of how those Beltway traitors have sold out our country. And so she's thinking that she's like an economist. You know, economists always give you reports on what happened in the prior 10 years, and these or 20 years, and this used to drive me crazy. As I was learning about the global system, they were giving us statistics that were only American. They didn't factor anything else in terms of the global economy. So what they were giving was tunnel vision, looking just at the United States, and they were giving a distorted and a twisted picture.
Yeah.
And I think they are the ones that are blind to the fact of what the information has, or what the internet has done for information for the American people. And I think that it's been a world of difference that I've witnessed myself, and it just keeps getting better every day in terms of people understanding
what's really going on.
That what the people in Washington, D.C. say is not the truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
No matter who they are.
Yeah, and what the study that this gentleman who wrote the book should have done is the correlation between the rise of the internet and the rise of populism. And I would strongly suggest that there is a correlation there that cannot be denied. I mean, this is the age of information. Yes, it's the age of disinformation as well. But the disinformation predated the internet, where we have access now to information of all strides, whether it's good information or bad information, like never before. But the beauty of it is that the people can now make up their own minds. We don't have to listen to Walter Cronkite strone on about the way it really is, even though it really isn't that way at all. And you know, all these other talking heads on TV who are now completely showing themselves for the propagandists that they are. For anybody who has the ability to think a little bit for themselves, unfortunately, a lot of people don't. But you know, it's very apparent that that these characters are partisans, number one, and that they're working every day to just push an agenda, push various agendas for it. All right, I'll tell you what, I got a couple of pieces of information to get to. I'm going to knock out a phone call here real quick. Hello, caller, you're on the air. Thanks for waiting.
Hey, guys, it's me again.
Hi there.
I believe it was Vicky. You mentioned Bill Gates earlier when you guys were talking about this quote-unquote pandemic. Mm-hmm. Noticed a little hint of sarcasm there. And here's something I found interesting, and I'd like to get your input on this. I was doing some research the other day in preparation for an upcoming broadcast that I'm going to do sometime in the next week or so. And I discovered that Bill Gates was actually involved financially with the virology lab in Wuhan, China. Mm-hmm. They believe that this coronavirus originated.
That would not surprise me at all, because Bill Gates has been in on the globalization of information systems since they began this. And if you were in his position, you know, even say you're not an owner of a company, but you're just in a company or an executive of a company, and you know that they are connecting up to China, and that China is going to be the manufacturer because it has been deemed to be so by the international trade negotiators. You would be in on it. You would have to invest in it because you know you're going to make a lot of money.
Well, we know Bill Gates is tied very closely to Debbie Birx, and we know he's tied very closely to Dr. Anthony Fauci. And Anthony Fauci was instrumental in that $3.7 million, grant or whatever, the money that went there from the NIH. And so, if not directly, I can certainly tie him indirectly. But yes, I mean he goes in those circles all the time, so it only makes sense.
Well, one of the global systems, one of the initial pilot systems. Okay, now a pilot system just means it's a starter system. It doesn't mean that they.
Right. It's the beginning phase.
One of the pilot systems was to link up all of the research laboratories for the Human Genome Project. Okay, so we know that these labs, the NIH labs, are connected to Wuhan. That was the plan. There is a global health system. So our nationalized medical records will become part of the global system of medical records. So we know that. I mean, I know that. I can show it to you.
Yeah. Anything else, Art?
Yeah, I'm going to email both you and Vicky some information on, I don't know if you've ever heard it, it's called the TSP. It's a thrift something. It's a retirement plan that goes above and beyond your typical 401k, and is primarily for high-ranking officials, military personnel, and such as this. It's a retirement investment program is what it is.
Okay.
And they're now looking to invest in Chinese interests. So I want to send that to you probably sometime this evening.
Okay.
And maybe you guys can look into this and maybe talk about it next Saturday if you have time, because this sounds, it's very disturbing to think that they would use a retirement program that was designed and set up for our military personnel and use that as a means to invest in Chinese interests. That
interesting. Me. Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah. But anyway,
I've heard about that, and I was under the impression that they were trying to stop that. Because what more insult is there in investing in a country that is becoming the enemy of your country?
But maybe there are.
Right.
But well, we have to have a paradigm shift, Vicky. I'm not sure, from their standpoint, that communist China really is an enemy of our country. I think there's a lot.
I'm not.
I think from the people's standpoint, yes. But the problem is, the old saying, "We've met the enemy, and the enemy is us." I think there's a lot more East-West cooperation going on. As a matter of fact, this whole pandemic thing with the Wuhan lab and the $3.7 million money that went over there from the United States government, the fact that they are paying the labs over there, and I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg. If they're doing it with one lab, there's other labs as well. This isn't a one-off. I mean, why would we believe that it's a one-off? I mean,
it isn't.
It's got to be happening everywhere. So the point is that for them to be outsourcing the development of bioweapons to our supposed avowed enemies indicates to me that there's a whole lot of East-West cooperation that's going on that we're not being told about. And in fact, if the people knew, I think they would be up in arms.
Well, we had, when the anthrax attacks came out, it was found that we had a Russian biowarfare scientist here working on anthrax. His name was Ken Alabak.
And the strain of anthrax that surfaced in Boca Raton, for example, it was discovered. It came directly from Fort Detrick, Maryland, a bioweapons lab. So I mean, none of this surprises me. And one other thing, and then I'll get out of your way and let you go. America needs to be real careful about declaring China enemy or declaring any hostile intent, because when you start to look at our ports, many of our roadways, our toll roads and freeways, and a lot of our infrastructure, guess who now owns it, folks?
Yeah, including our currency. Let's not forget that one.
China.
Right. Well, you're right, and I don't blame China for the for the betrayal that was negotiated and agreed to by our own government officials.
Yeah,
and that includes every single trade representative that has held that office since 1962 when they created the position.
Hey, thanks, Art. Appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Yeah, your enemy is just smart enough to take all the ground that you're willing to give up. But are they?
Sometimes I when I look at this whole the United States as a nation and the international system and everything, and I swear we have had the dumbest, either one of two things. We have either had the dumbest people in the entire world negotiating for our country, working for our country, in the State Department and whatever, or the most evil and wicked betrayers of all time.
I'll vote for option 2, Alex.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, speaking of betrayal, the Western Journal.com is reporting, and it's not just them, it's others too, but Operation Warp Speed is in play now. This is a Manhattan Project-style plan which Trump has set in motion to produce a vaccine. It's a massive project which aims to find a manufacturer of a vaccine for the novel coronavirus before the end of 2020, according to multiple reports. Codenamed Operation Warp Speed, the planned effort was first reported by Bloomberg News. According to sources cited by Bloomberg, so Bloomberg you can take with a grain of salt, but there, like I said, there are other outlets as well that are reporting this. According to sources cited by Bloomberg, and by the way, Bloomberg wouldn't necessarily believe that a vaccine they would all believe it's great that he's doing this. They're all pro-vaxxers. But according to sources cited by Bloomberg, the Trump administration project has the goal of producing enough effective vaccines to inoculate much of the country. The deadline puts those tasked with finding the vaccine in a major time crunch, with only 8 months left before 2021. The timetable is only a fraction of what researchers and scientists working on previous vaccines have faced. The ambitious project will have a wealth of resources at its disposal. Operation Warp Speed will draw on military components, U.S. government agencies, and private pharmaceutical companies to hit the fast-approaching deadline. According to a Reuters report on the plan, as many as 15 drug companies could be involved in the hunt for a vaccine. While it seems like a recipe for success, Vicky, there are doubts that the deadline is realistic. Instead of the 8 months given to Operation Warp Speed, some experts predict it could take up to 18 months for a successful and safe vaccine to enter production. And I would say, what do you mean safe vaccine? Anybody care to sign up and be a laboratory rat for Big Pharma? I mean, it's worked out so well for others down through the years. I mean, and we played that audio from the 60 Minutes from the 1976 swine flu. That certainly comes to mind very quickly. So, yeah, Trump.
That's one of those initiatives that makes me want Trump to lose the next election.
But the problem is that his opponent would be all in with that as well.
Well, that's true. That's
no matter
true.
who you
but
get.
All they're doing is they're subsidizing very, very wealthy companies that are already making so much money. I mean, that makes no sense whatsoever. They're taking and plus viruses mutate. We know that.
Yeah, and then that's probably maybe the reason why the purported reason why they're trying to do this so quickly is because it's mutating, but it's already mutated. There are already multiple strains of this thing in the first place.
Well, it's like shooting. It's shooting at a moving target.
There you go.
Only the target moves faster than your ability to focus and shoot. So.
A moving target, which you have to use unique bullets on, and every time you have a bullet to shoot at it, it's modified in such a way that it's inoculated itself against your bullet. That's the problem. That's how it's moving. The best course of action is to do nothing and let the general population build up their antibodies against this thing so that their bodies can learn to fight it off. That's why you don't quarantine healthy people. You allow healthy people to do what healthy people do in a free society, and if they get it, they get it. Hey, you know what? It's sad if they get it, but most of them will get better. Yeah, some will die, and that's a tragic situation. But folks, you can't prevent death. You can't just you can't lock the country down in a technocratic state of control like they're trying to do. You can't save the world from everything.
Well, and besides, it's insulting to have them say we're going to spend all of this money, give all this money to these wealthy companies to come up with a vaccine to save your life. And, oh, by the way, we don't give a damn if you don't have a job and if you're starving, because we're importing people faster than our job market can absorb the people. So, I mean, none of it makes sense logically.
You also have to keep in mind, every time that they come out with these projections, and Trump is just as guilty as anybody, where if we hadn't have done this, I think he realizes he stepped in it now by listening to these characters and destroying the economy that we had before, because he was on his way to sailing to re-election. I mean, I said on this broadcast before all this started, it's really difficult to not see how he. It's difficult to not see. It's difficult to see how he wouldn't be elected. I think that's how I put it. But anyway. Now it's very much in flux. It's very much in question. Although Joe Biden does have his own problems, as we can get to in a moment. But what I was going to say is that Trump, that this whole thing is based on computer models. All of the deaths, the same types of computer models which has predicted the end of the world due to climate change, due to anthropogenic greenhouse warming. How many times have they predicted that, the seas are rising and, Florida's going to disappear and, our hair's on fire and the world's going to end. You had all these projections over the years that were supposed to come to pass, and yet here we are. Humanity continues to march on. I mean, these same computer models are now projecting, had we not locked everything down, had we not turned the world into a totalitarian police state, had we not dragged pastors out of churches and arrested them, why, we all would have died.
Yeah.
We'd have had so many millions. This whole thing, Vicky, came from a computer model. The lockdown started after a computer model, a very faulty computer model, a model that was so bad that even the people who modeled it later admitted that it was bogus. They later admitted, we made a mistake. Okay? We talked about that on the show. This computer model that came out of Imperial College London, which, by the way, Bill Gates funds. He funds Imperial College.
Funny thing.
Yes. So this whole computer model came out of that. And this is the basis upon which our nation was locked down. Think about that.
Well, whenever I hear the term computer model, I immediately dismiss the results because I consider it to be just a marketing tool. That's all.
Well, computer
they just selected the variables and the time frame that they wanted to give them the results that they want to have. So as far as I'm concerned, computer models are trash.
Well,
they are pure trash.
I have to slightly disagree with you. I think computer models are useful in certain situations. For instance, meteorologists use computer models all the time to predict the weather. And you know what? They've got to the point where they can do it fairly accurately, despite what a lot of people say. I mean, generally, when I go to the National Weather Service and I look at the forecast, I mean, it's not 100% because there's a lot of variables. And they'll tell you that. If you talk to meteorologists, they'll say that, hey, you can only predict the weather a day or two out, and even then, it's difficult. It's because there's a lot of variables that can affect the weather. But and forecasting the path of a hurricane, you can look at the spaghetti models where these different computer models predict the storm will take, and most of the time it takes somewhere in the middle. Okay. But even with that, these spaghetti models, they're widely all over the place because it all depends upon the data that you put into these things, and that determines what you're going to get out of it.
Right, but that's a different kind of model. The results are verifiable. What did you predict yesterday and what did happen today? So it's verifiable. And you also have to look at the incentives. What are the incentives for this modeler's data to be accepted? Well, in the case of the modeling of the path of this so-called pandemic, mm-hmm. we're talking about trillions of dollars worldwide. Yeah. And so, you've got to look at the incentives. But I stand by what I said. When I hear computer model, I toss it out. Because it depends on what variables, depends on the honesty and the integrity of the person who has collected the data and who has put the data into the computer and the algorithms that they use. So there's too many places where it can be manipulated. Yeah. So I consider it it's a marketing tool.
Yes.
Period.
Well, that's we certainly shouldn't be determining public policy based on computer models. I mean, 100%. They are trash when it comes to that, for sure. Mm-hmm. You can't predict. You can't base your public policy on a computer model, and that's exactly what's happened here. Now,
we shouldn't have to, because when you think about the speed of computers, it's like instantaneous. When you take a product off the shelf in Walmart, they're already compiling the order. They've already sent the order out for the next shipment into the store. So if they can do that, they don't need estimates. But our government is still using estimates of everything. I mean, when you think of our unemployment statistics, totally false. And it doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way at all. But it's very convenient for the statistics to stay trash.
I should call up the Department of Labor's statistics. I haven't looked at them lately, but I have a feeling it's going to be jaw-dropping because just about everybody's out of work. Now they're going to send a few back, but anyway, I want to turn a corner, Vicky, because I don't know how many people are aware of and maybe it's old information, but I just came across it. Are you familiar with this publication on the World, I guess it's the World International Patent Organization website? It's an official international organization. It's the cryptocurrency system using body activity data. By the way, this is publication. Now get this. I hope you're sitting down. Publication W020200060606.
Oh, great.
So WO 2020 060606. I don't think that's an accident. I don't think that's haphazardly an accident. When you start seeing what this is, they're waving it right in your face. This is cryptocurrency system using body activity data. The abstract says human body activity. And by the way, this is a patent that was filed worldwide by Microsoft Technology Licensing LLC. 1 Microsoft Way, Redmond, Washington. It's got the zip code there, and the inventors, Dustin Abrahamson, Derek F.U. This almost seems like a spoof, except that it's really on it's on the Patent Scope website. Anyway, it says it almost seems too hard. It almost seems hard to believe, but it says human body activity associated with a task provided to a user may be used in a mining process of a cryptocurrency system. A server may provide a task to a device of a user, which is communicatively coupled to the server. A sensor communicatively coupled to or comprised in the device of the user may sense body activity of the user. Body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. The cryptocurrency system communicatively coupled to the device of the user may verify if the body activity data satisfies one or more conditions set by the cryptocurrency system, and, if so, award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. So what this seems to be is a patent that was filed again by Microsoft in March of this year. So just recently, very recently, in which a device is attached to a server. The device, they don't say it's implantable, at least not that I've seen in here, and I haven't read all of this because it's quite voluminous. But the device in fact, I remember seeing in there that they said it can be worn. Okay, but what the device senses is various aspects of a person's body. The amount that you sweat, the amount that it can detect radiation from the body, brain waves. It can detect various, aspects. In other words, so even to the point where maybe it could see what you were thinking, if you're supposed to be doing a sit-down job, are you playing solitaire, or are you actually looking at company documents, or, it could detect your sweat if you're supposed to be doing physical labor. So the idea being that, at least according to my mental grasp of this, is that it will detect whether or not you are actually working. And if these criteria, whatever criteria is programmed in the server, the algorithms determine that you have done enough work, then you will be awarded your cryptocurrency. This is nothing short. I mean, you read this. As a matter of fact, let me just read a little bit of it to you. A virtual currency is a medium of exchange implemented through the internet generally, not tied to a specific government-backed flat or printed currency, such as the U.S. dollar or the euro, and typically designed to allow instantaneous transactions and borderless transfer of ownership. One example of a virtual currency is cryptocurrency, wherein cryptography is used to secure transactions and to control the creation of new units. Several cryptocurrencies exist, and they go into it, and I don't want to get into that. Okay, so they say electronic cash system. A blockchain is a data structure that stores a list of transactions that can be thought of as a distributed electronic ledger that records transactions between source identifiers and destination identifiers. The transactions are bundled into blocks, and every block refers back to or is linked to a prior block in the blockchain. Computer resources maintain the blockchain and cryptographically validate each new block and the transactions contained in the corresponding block. The validation process includes computationally solving a difficult problem that is also easy to verify and is sometimes called proof of work. Key thing there, proof of work. The process is referred to as mining. The mining may be a random process with low probability, so that a lot of trial and error is required to solve a computationally difficult problem. Accordingly, the mining may require enormous amounts of computational energy. It is with respect to these and other general considerations that the following embodiments have been described. Also, although relatively specific problems have been discussed, it should be understood that the embodiments should not be limited to solving specific problems identified in the background. Now, here's the crux of it. Because what they're getting at here is replacing the computational problem solving that has traditionally defined mining for cryptocurrency, replacing that with actual labor from the slaves, okay? And they don't call them slaves. That's what I call them. People like us. Some exemplary embodiments, they say, of the present disclosure may use human body activity associated with a task provided to a user as a solution to mining challenges in cryptocurrency systems. For example, a brainwave or body heat emitted from the user when the user performs the task provided by an information or service provider, such as viewing advertisement or using certain internet services, can be used in the mining process. Instead of massive computation work required by some conventional cryptocurrency systems, data generated based on the body activity of the user can be a proof of work, and therefore a user can solve the computationally difficult problem unconsciously. Accordingly, certain exemplary embodiments of the present disclosure may reduce computational energy for the mining process, as well as make the mining process faster. Systems, methods, and hardware aspects of computational readable storage media are provided herein for a cryptocurrency system using human body activity data. According to various embodiments of the present disclosure, a server may provide a task to a device of a user which is communicatively coupled to the server. A sensor communicatively coupled to or comprised in the device of the user may sense body activity of the user. Body activity data may be generated based on the sensed body activity of the user. A cryptocurrency system communicatively coupled to the device of the user may verify whether or not the body activity data satisfies one or more conditions set up by the cryptocurrency system and award cryptocurrency to the user whose body activity data is verified. You talk about being ruled by algorithm, folks. Here it is.
That sounds like a 21st century time clock body. I wonder if you have to wear some kind of cap on your head that can sense brain activity,
or maybe
feed that back into the.
Maybe it'll be the implantable microchip. Where if you don't, but this is nothing short of a recipe for behavioral modification and control.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if these sensors detect that you're not, number one, in the right place at the right time, you're doing the right thing, or even thinking about the right thing at the right time, I mean, you're going to have to live your life. If we had such a system in place, you would have to live your life for the sensor. All of your behavior, even your thoughts. This is the kind of control these technocrats want to impose. It is incredible.
They also make the assumption, they will make the assumption that their system is absolutely accurate. And so what they can
just like their computer models
is reward people that they want to reward and penalize people that they want to penalize in spite of whatever their system says. This is where the magic of the computer comes in, where things can be transformed. Data can go in one way and come out the other way.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing verifiable for a person who is working, for a living. There's no way to verify. I guess they could videotape themselves, but if the machine says, yes, we saw you at your machine, but we don't record any activity, so that means you were just zombie typing at the
zombie typing at the what?
At your machine.
Yeah. Well, this is just incredible, and in the fact that it's publication number WO 2020 060606.
You know what really upsets me is that these people are being allowed to design and build these technology systems, and the people out here have no say in it whatsoever.
No.
I mean, a system like that will absolutely affect a person's life and their future fortunes and all kinds of things, but yet they have no say in it. It's like these people have taken over, these technology people have taken over the world, and they're like hostile aliens.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking at some of these names of some of these characters. And this it's the international application number PCT US PCT/US 2019/038084. The publication date was March 26, 2020, and as I said, the publication number was WO/2020/060606. I was trying to find the actual patent number. Maybe the publication number is the patent number. But this is on more than one site too. But this is actually on the actual World International Patent Organization. But like I said, it almost seems too out there and so in your face. It almost, if you didn't know better, you'd swear. But this is very detailed. I mean, they got schematics and everything in here.
Some people go through elaborate efforts for satire. So
well, it's right on the like I say, patentscope.wipo.int. It's
WIPO.
Yeah, the World International Patent Organization.
Uh-huh.
Let me go back here. The IP portal. The one-stop shop. Well, I don't know. I'll look at this more in depth. I'll put this in the show notes.
I bet you there's somebody working on it.
Yeah, this is a good lead-in. This is a good lead-in for where I want to go next, because the World Economic Forum held a session on creating a trusted global cryptocurrency. Okay? So they are working on international cryptocurrency, whether that's real or not, and it certainly looked pretty real to me. I'm pretty good at picking out frauds. Now, I look at some things that do, like the fact that this one of the inventors was Derek Fu, or Derek Fu, okay? I guess would be the name, Derek Fu. But it looks like Fu. So I'm wondering, I'll look into this a little more. But if that's real, that's pretty astounding. But they are working on an international cryptocurrency, and I do believe they intend to make it a global thing. And so the World Economic Forum held a session on creating a trusted global cryptocurrency. The panelists are Catherine Mulligan, who is with Imperial College London. Hey, sound familiar? And Elizabeth Rosilio, CEO of Asa Finance. And they talked about three proposals or archetypes that have been brought forward in recent years. One of these include the replacement of the U.S. dollar, the world's reserve currency.
And there are three basic sort of archetypes, right? We've got the first one, which are the permissionless cryptocurrencies, where nobody knows anyone, but you can transact peer-to-peer. The second type is ones we're seeing from for example, China, who are looking at creating a cryptocurrency for the renminbi. So that's a government-backed cryptocurrency. We're also seeing some interesting moves around in that space around, for example, how you could create a digital currency to replace the US dollar as the reserve. That's come, that idea has come from Mark Carney from the Bank of England.
Okay, now continuing here with the
third archetype, however, that we can think about is this idea of the corporate coin, what I call a corporate coin or a private coin, which is where a number of different private sector or non-government, basically, sector organisations get together and create a currency of their own. The most common example that people talk about in that space is Libra, but it's not the only example. And I think the key thing to remember about those three different types is actually it's the governance mechanisms that differentiate them, really. So you can use the same technology in all three, but the governance around who is taking decisions and who is controlling those currencies is what is different.
Right. Okay, and you mentioned Libra. That's the one that's backed by Facebook.
Okay, so they discussed how Bitcoin is already legal tender in Japan, which is something I wasn't aware of, and how that came to be.
So I think the first thing is understanding what these governance implications mean. So firstly, there's a huge amount of opportunity here to create really innovative interactions with money. So effectively, you can think about cryptocurrencies giving you an API to finance, really, in some format. The other thing to think very carefully about, however, is...
Now, do we really want people having an API into finance? I mean, think about this.
Yeah. What I was wondering is, I wonder how much study of the history of money she's done, or is she only, does she only understand the technology? Because a lot of what I hear from these technology people is that they're focused on the technology, can we do it? But the ramifications of doing it out in the general population are an entirely different thing.
No, I agree with you. I think you're right. I think they don't understand the ramifications. They don't understand the history of money. I think they're very bright-eyed. In fact, some of them are pretty young. They're very bright-eyed, wide-eyed, and hey, they're the same people that go around taking selfies all the time. They love technology.
I'm young and wonderful and beautiful. Look at me.
Yeah, this is something we can do. Why not just try it? What could possibly go wrong?
Read a book. That's the answer. Read a book. There are lots of books on the history of money. That's what can go wrong.
What's a book?
Yeah, well, back, I guess during before the Civil War, every local bank had its own currency.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about those things with little pieces of paper in them?
Well, yeah, but it doesn't matter if they were issuing electronic digital notes. It wouldn't make any difference. You'd have the same problem. You've got Bank A issuing their version of the electronic digit, and Bank B over in the next town issuing their version. Mm-hmm. And it's a system that just didn't work out. If you don't have and now extrapolate that idea across the whole world, where you have every little podunk town that has a bank issuing their own brand of Bitcoin. How could you ever possibly resolve that?
Yeah, well, they're going to try.
Is what it implies if large corporations such as Libra and Facebook, take control of a currency that potentially, might have impact on 2 billion users. And the reason to understand the issues around that is because it is actually, that's corporations taking the role that government used to have of setting and managing, controlling currency.
Okay, I have to interject here, by the way. Corporations already have that role. The Federal Reserve is a private entity, but okay.
So those implications are actually extremely important to understand.
But I do have to give them credit. At least they are worried about corporations overtly taking control of the currency. Right now, what we have is a classic example of a public-private partnership where you have private entities cooperating with our Treasury Department. And anyway, without getting too deep into that, let's go continue.
It's becoming a de facto government in some form by doing that. And so the implications of that governance is really important.
So imagine if you had frequent flyer miles, and let's say we have Lufthansa miles. and Lufthansa creates these miles, and it creates a coin out of these miles, and no longer can you just book flights with your Lufthansa miles on Lufthansa. What if you could then trade those Lufthansa miles at your corner supermarket? If you could pay your rent in Lufthansa miles, you could trade them with each other. All of a sudden, Lufthansa no longer has centralized control over that.
She's got some major Rocco Fry going on.
Similar to what Libra is trying to do. They're creating the miles, the coin. They're setting up registered agents that can trade it and make a market in it. But they're hoping that people then start to take those miles, the Libra, and trade it amongst each other. But in the end of the day, you're still dependent on the agents that it's set up. So what Kathy was alluding to is that the governance, the initial governance, is designated by whoever sets up that corporate coin. So what's the use case of that? The idea is that, well, if it gets very popular and everybody loves flying Lufthansa, then, you get to benefit from flying on the plane, using Facebook, which you already do, and then also having a really convenient brand that you trust and easy kind of distribution.
Because I don't know about you, when I go spending money, it's very important that I trust the brand.
To kind of create value and then ease transactions.
Fingers in cheeks and say, oh, what if the company, everybody has this really popular air miles or whatever, and the company ends the program. Whoa!
Yeah, then you have a moment.
Create value and then ease transactions between you. That's one case. When you go to the first model that I talked before about, which is more distributed, I've been living and working in the last 10 years across African markets, and when I started in East Africa, most of the banks that I was working with were part of the global de-risking event, which means that they lost their correspondent bank status. So suddenly when I went to my local bank in Kenya, Nairobi, it was very difficult to send an international transaction because first I had to take my Kenyan shilling, purchase US dollar through a intermediary. That US dollar would go through either Deutsche or Citibank or Standard Chartered and then go somewhere else. So the cost of transactions in sub-Saharan Africa rose almost to 10% in some markets, up to 20% in other markets.
Okay.
Well, gee, who'd have thunk?
Yeah, it's so difficult doing all this currency exchanges, and we could save so much money without national borders and national currencies.
Yeah.
Nationhood is such a problem, Vicky. Anyway, they discussed how the Bitcoin is already. I thought we already did that one. My notes are messed up.
Yeah, just to push back a little bit. So Bitcoin is legal tender in Japan. But Japan is not Sudan. Okay, so if it's more palatable, we could talk a little bit about Japan, where you had one of the largest crises. You had the first cryptocurrencies issue there. There was a scandal with a company that had very poor governance. There was no regulatory oversight. The company collapsed. It was called Mt. Gox. It was heard around the world. And then what did the Japanese government do? They could have gone the way of Iceland and say, we're not doing that again. And rather what they did is they took less than 2 years to issue very complex, strict, but clear regulation on how Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies of the first category could be used in the country. And they made it legal tender. And so now when you go to Tokyo, you see giant signs everywhere how to buy, trade, and use it. When you go into supermarkets, you can actually pay with Bitcoin. When you go into all sorts of online shops, DMM, the largest e-commerce site, it's frequently accepted. But that's just on the Japanese island. Korea as well has had a phenomenon and a lot of positive regulation. So there are countries around the world where this is taking off. Is it a global cryptocurrency? I don't think we've seen global acceptance. So that's why I think we see the corporate coins come in and say, okay, well, that sort of worked. There is demand for it, but it's not in 50 countries. It's not in 100 companies. And that's something that kind of the corporates are stepping in, seeing that opportunity from this global experiment and saying, how do we enter this and take it to the next level? And then I think even governments are coming in saying, well, how do we get involved in this technology? Maybe this is something that we should be looking at.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important points is that when we saw Libra pop up, what actually happened is nearly every regulator in the world said, oh, hang on a second, because actually it took cryptocurrency to the point of being a systemic risk. Because up until that point, Mark Carney and a lot of the banks, in the central banks around the world, have basically said Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies are not yet big enough to create a systemic risk. So what is happening, I think, is we are seeing corporates stepping into what is a regulatory vacuum. And so I think there is a really important piece of work that needs to be done over the next couple of months, helping regulators understand how to appropriately regulate for cryptocurrency.
Okay, I want to hold it right there. We'll pick it back up after the top of the hour break. This is very, very real. I don't know about the patent that I was reading earlier. I'm starting to have a little bit of my doubts about that now. It certainly looks real, but we'll look into that more. But this World Economic Forum thing definitely is real. And understanding technocracy the way we do, the control is real. The goals are real. So let's take the top of the hour break, and we'll continue on the other side with this, and we'll get into some other things. The final half hour, or the final hour of the show, is going to be very, very busy, folks. Stay with us. This is Govern America. Vicky Davis is here. I'm Darren Weeks. We'll continue.
Before us the opportunity to forge for ourselves and for future generations a new world order.
New world order.
New world order. This is a moment to seize. The kaleidoscope has been shaken. The pieces are in flux. Soon they will settle again. Before they do, let us reorder this world around us.
A new world order.
A world where the United Nations is poised to fulfill the historic vision of its founders.
Nevertheless, the United States is in a key position to shape this so that the problem of the Bush presidency will be the emergence of a new international order.
The first decade of the 21st century, that out of what will be seen as the greatest restructuring of the global economy, a new world order was created.
Documenting the crisis of our republic.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Waging war on the New World Order.
The councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
This is Govern America with Darren Weeks and Vicky Davis.
Live from FEMA Regions 5 and 10, this is hour number 3 of Govern America. I'm Darren Weeks. As we continue on here, it continues to be the 2nd of May, 2020. As during the break, I was looking a little more on this WIPO IP portal, and it does look like a genuine website. It looks like you can search out various patents from around the globe. There's a menu here at the top, and when it takes you to, when you click on the menu, it has patents, marks, designs, marks as in, trademarks and things like that. You can search for patents, you can search for trademarks, you can search for designs, geographical indications, finance, IP alternative dispute resolution, domain name dispute resolution. There's those in the submenu for patents is patent scope, EPCT, whatever that is. I'm not quite sure. There's various other menu items as well. This is a very elaborate menu structure here, and so this looks like a legitimate search tool. And in fact, when you go to the patent scope, it does give you a form to type in whatever patent number, and it gives you guidelines on the syntax to use when you type it in. So this,
yeah, I have no doubt that even if it was a parody, which probably isn't, but even if it was, I have no doubt that that there are people that are working on it, because they have an idea that everybody is going to be working at home, working on computers. They completely left out manual labor out of the New World.
Mm-hmm.
But employers have always been able to measure the amount of work by laborers, but they've never really had a way to do that with people that work with their brains. So, I have no doubt that they're working on it, because they have to get extract every bit of work out of a person that they possibly can.
Well, this really speaks, and that's the thing that really alarms me, not so much the fact that hard work is something that has defined the American experience. It's only recently that society has become soft, and as the hard labor jobs have been eliminated into out of our country. They've been exported to other slave labor states. But the fact that they are trying to, it's the control. It's the fact that they are apparently, if this is a real patent, which now I'm starting to really believe that it is. As I look at this site a little more, and like I say, this has been, I think, on other patent sites as well. So it's very interesting to look at this and see it. But if this is real, I mean, this really does define exactly what they have in mind to control the population. Control your mind, control everything, every aspect. And we know that's how technocracy is anyway. We know that is the
systems,
goal.
Every single system that they're working on or implementing, even if it seems like a game or seems, like it's a recreation thing, it is a management system. They're all management systems, and the idea is to control people.
Yes, absolutely. Let's continue with this cryptocurrency thing from the World Economic Forum, because we know they are definitely exploring cryptocurrency as a world currency.
In a way that protects consumers, protects their financial stability in the institutions, but also ensures that people aren't tempted necessarily to step into corporate coins which are replacing that vacuum, if that makes sense. They've taken over that vacuum.
So they're arguing against cryptocurrency, a world cryptocurrency that is controlled by one corporation. I would argue that the likelihood of that not happening is very slim, because world government is defined by multinational corporations. And then that's, anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in my commentary here. It turns out that there's a lot of things going on the African continent, believe it or not, with regard to cryptocurrencies. And it may surprise you that that a pilot has actually been created for a global cryptocurrency. It's actually been built in Africa.
Zimbabwe is a great experiment for where Bitcoin has helped a lot of people and has allowed them to have something that was recognized internationally. And in Mark Carney's speech, he talked about the idea that distributed digital currencies could actually include people who've been left out of the USD market, so who don't have access to that, which is the case in Zimbabwe, where it's impossible to access USD with local currency. So, I mean, we have examples all across the continent that vary the spectrum. So we have Kenya, which was very early to ban any kind of cryptocurrency in the country. I think in 2015 they decided, we don't really know enough about this, we don't like the way it smells, so no. And that is the same time when Japan went the opposite direction. 2 months later, you had the South African Reserve Bank, the SARB, published in March a very in-depth piece to say they don't believe there's systemic risk, and they were going to create their own pilot. They actually used a blockchain to connect all of the banks in the financial sector. They did a pilot. They discussed what the potential systemic risk could be, and they put a measured approach to how regulation could begin. And you've seen other African markets take that as a precedent. So you saw Uganda and you saw Nigeria say that certain kind of cryptocurrencies, and they named them, and these are, not corporate coins, but they were early cryptocurrencies, and they said these ones pose a risk to customers. there's a consumer issue here, so watch out for that. So they continued their role as protecting the consumer, and they issued guidance on that. I think that's the first role, protect the consumer. The second role is cybersecurity. Is there some sort of risk to the government on the cybersecurity front? So you often saw governments have their cybersecurity squad and their committee step in and understand that. And then third, I think with the central bank's role of, stability, that's been a little bit slower and has followed suit to the rest of the world, like the FCA in the UK and Singapore, who have decided that trading these currencies or operating within these currencies would be under the payment systems. So a lot of the regulation that's occurred around the world tends towards the monetary use case of that. So first with consumers, second with cybersecurity, and third with consumer payments.
All right. Any commentary on that at this point in time?
Yeah, I'd like to know how she defines systemic risk. Risk to whom? Is she talking about risk to the corporation, risk to the consumer, risk to our government and our economy as a whole? How does she define that?
That's a good question.
She just kind of throws it out there, systemic risk.
I'm betting she's talking about risk to markets.
Risk to markets.
To the shareholders. Too. Yeah.
The list goes on and on. I don't know how she can throw out the term systemic risk without defining it.
It's interesting that Snopes is trying to debunk this thing. Does Microsoft? There's an article on Snopes' website, which, by the way, I totally understand Snopes, okay? But they try to debunk everything that's true. But does Microsoft own patent 666 about implanting microchips in people? It says, the claim is Microsoft owns patent 666, which involves inserting microchips into people to mine their activity for cryptocurrency purposes. They say, mostly false. What's true? Here's what's true. Now, so in debunking it, they actually substantiate it. They say, what's true? Microsoft published a patent for a cryptocurrency system using body activity data. This patent is filed under the number WO 2020-060606A1. Now, they're saying that's true. What's false, they say, the number WO 2020-060606A1 contains 3 sixes, but is obviously not the same as 666. This patent focuses on tracking body activity via wearable technology such as smartwatch and makes no mention of implanted microchips. So even Snopes is saying this is a real patent. So for whatever that's worth. And they're debunking, they actually substantiate it. So there you go. For whatever that's worth. Anyway,
not much.
I've got one more audio clip.
From Snopes, not much. The one good piece of information is that it's a real patent.
Yeah, even though we may not want to know that it's a real patent. All right, I understand there's a call on the line. Just hang with me a little bit longer. I got one more clip from this conference. They one of the audience members floated the possibility that a U.S. dollar cryptocurrency could exist side by side. A U.S. dollar cryptocurrency could exist side by side with the existing U.S. dollar. And so you'd have both of them kind of simultaneously existing.
That's my question to you. Do you think governments right now, they believe and trust local cryptocurrency more than global cryptocurrencies? It means that they are customizing their, the cryptocurrency. Maybe we'll witness a new, currency. Instead of having currency, also we'll have another one, cryptocurrencies, and with the same, for example, U.S. dollar and U.S. dollar cryptocurrency.
Yeah, so we see some very small countries, small in terms of size of economy, doing just that. Bermuda is one of them. So the government has been very active in digitizing their currency and working with cryptocurrencies in a very kind of open way. So I think it as a competitive advantage or as an ability to participate. So I think maybe we should stop saying, regulatory arbitrage, and we just say lowering the barrier to entry and allowing more countries to participate. So for a country like Oman, it might be very interesting to kind of pursue that further and to think about how that would increase your citizens' ability to participate in global markets.
Catherine?
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting point. So for me, there's a strong possibility that you could have USD cryptocurrency or something like that sometime in the future. And again, I think working towards governments taking that decision rather than corporates, I don't care how big their brand is, being allowed to step into that vacuum. I think that's really important. And encouraging governments to investigate and to also potentially build pilots in that space is really, really important, because then you can have informed discussions with companies and startups and all of that in this space. You really understand what's going on.
So that's it. That's what I got on that particular panel discussion. But that's the World Economic Forum, and I think that's very obvious that we're going to have some sort of digital cryptocurrency coming down the pipe very, very soon with regard to all of this. And they intend for it to be global, just like the U.S. dollar is now considered the world's reserve currency. All right, let's go to the phones right now and see what John in California has to say. Hello, John. You're on the air.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I know quite a bit about what's going on in the crypto since my background is financial, and I stopped advocating any investments in the U.S. dollar back in 2007. Mm-hmm. What happened in Japan, they adopted that Bitcoin as a currency on July 1st of 2017. Well, what was going on over there, they were already going cashless, and a lot of the people would work in a business or something, and they'd have about 30 minutes for lunch over there, and they'd have to go to, you remember the old kind of automatic systems that used to exist? You see them in old movies where you walk in and you put some coins in a little door, and you take out your piece of cake, and then you take out some for a salad and stuff like that. Well, they would place orders, and they would into a machine, and they would only have 30 minutes. But when they inserted their digital tokens, their system was taking way too long to process. So many times the employee never got to eat. They'd have to go back to work. Huh. But the way they solved their coin problem, because they were inefficient, they just adopted Bitcoin as a currency over there, and that solved the problem. A couple other things you guys were talking about. If you really want to get a good understanding of these electronic coins and the history of money, there's a book called The Bitcoin Standard, and the author is Saifedean Ammous. Saifedean is spelled S-A-I, F as in Frank, E as in Echo, and the word Dean, Saifedean. Ammous is A-M-M-O-U-S.
Okay.
People want to say Ammous, but no, it's like, hey, there's a moose there. It's a moose.
Okay.
That book, the first half of the book, is a complete history of money. How things become money, what makes good money, and other things like that. Now, another thing you're talking about, too, is very analogous to, remember old S&H green stamps and the blue stamps and kind of stuff? Mm-hmm. Those were literally little currencies attached to a corporation, because you could get that money back through the stamps, and then you could purchase goods and services from the company store kind of thing.
I gotcha.
The Matrix was a good movie that predicted a lot of this stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
In terms of attaching and using the bodies, remember they had all the bodies kind of floating there?
Oh, yeah.
Attached to wires and stuff like that?
Yep.
And so they've been planning to do this kind of thing for quite a bit of time. There are two things that you want to look at to get a good understanding of a couple things, because they keep talking about cryptocurrency. Most of these are just centralized digital coins. They're really not a cryptocurrency. The only one cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. There is no central point of failure. And it's always these third parties that cause you problems that have some control of the money system. So Bitcoin, there is no control. They can't call up the president of Bitcoin or the local Bitcoin bank and say, "Hey, give me that guy's money because he owes me taxes." Right. That just doesn't happen. There are two things. One is two videos. One is by the Colbert Report, and it's called The Bitcoin Psyop. This is the attempt for banks. What they're trying to do is merge the concept of it's all blockchain. It's blockchain. Forget about Bitcoin. It's blockchain. You cannot have a true decentralized blockchain without using Bitcoin. He explains it very well in about 30 minutes. Okay. There's another guy, Andreas Antonopoulos, who has given out a lot of information, and this is a very important, kind of a hard title, but he's speaking, and he has a video called Blockchain and Bullshit. And he gets into
you got to avoid using the S word
banks
on
are
the
trying
air.
to do. Say again?
Yeah, you got to avoid using the S. We try to keep it FCC friendly, so you got to avoid the S word. I don't care about it, but you know.
Oh, that's the title. That's the title of.
Oh, okay. That's the title of the book. Okay.
No. That's a speech. This is a video that's on YouTube that you can go listen to about what the banks are trying to do with Bitcoin and how they're trying to have these conferences about these cryptocurrencies and change the system. In a short few minutes, you get a really good understanding of what you're hearing now from these conferences.
Gotcha.
Those two videos right there will really give you a good background, and Saifedean's book will give you a very solid understanding of the money history and why Bitcoin is harder money than gold. And in about 11 days, it's going to get harder because the inflation rate in Bitcoin is going to drop to like 1.8%. Gold inflates at a rate between 2 and 3%.
Why would there be inflation in Bitcoin? And the other question I have is if Bitcoin is for private transactions between two parties, then the government won't be able to monitor and keep track of the money that's out there, right? Do you think that they'll ever really allow that? If you could have private transactions between people like a drug dealer and his...
You can't stop it.
They can't stop it. Okay.
Most of the transactions that are occurring right now that you're not seeing, we're transferring millions of dollars of Bitcoin, but we do it person to person. So let's say, for example,
okay, hold on just a minute.
Bitcoin.
Before you go on, let me just expand a little bit on her question for a second. What if?
Shoot.
What if the government mandated as a part of their system, if they develop this cryptocurrency system, and it's a centralized system. Now, I understand Bitcoin is decentralized, but I think what they have in mind is a centralized system, which would mean they would have the key to the encryption. So they could potentially decrypt.
It doesn't need to be encrypted. That's the point.
Well, it would still have to be encrypted to keep the criminals from hacking into it and stealing all your whatever, doing transactions in your name and to prevent ordinary criminal fraud.
Your banking account is now. Just like your bank account is now. That's what it would be like.
Yeah. Well, that doesn't make me feel much better. Because
the thing
they can already...
The currencies that they control... You've got to understand that the analog to the dollar already exists in the crypto coin universe. The first one that did it was called Tether, Tether. Now you have others that have come out, and they all related to USD, and it's like a money market fund. You can get out of your Bitcoin or Ethereum or any of these other alternate coins, which are eventually going to fade away, kind of. But the point is that you can move to a U.S. dollar-based currency right now. They already exist. It's really fascinating what's going on here. What you need to understand is that I can transact with somebody using Bitcoin on paper. I can print a Bitcoin. Bitcoin is free speech, by the way. It's computer code, which has already been determined by the feds that it's speech. You've got some constitutional protections there if you're under the Constitution. So a lot of these questions have already been kind of asked and answered, and there's a lot going on behind the scenes that you just don't hear about. But again, those two videos, the Bitcoin PSYOP and stuff, will give you an idea more of understanding what these guys are talking about. But let's take for example, something called Ripple. The Ripple company has a coin called XRP. They can burn that or they can inflate it at will. So digital currency is really not any different than USD. Except that it makes it easier for the government, because if you're going to be using their stuff, if you are required to use their money, then you're going to be subject to all of the same problems you are. It just makes it easier. For example, when they put on electric meters, and they're putting it on your water and you're putting it on your electricity.
Right.
If you miss your payment, they just flip a switch, a computer switch, and turn you off.
Yeah, exactly.
you don't have to. You could have control over your cash flow because you could automatically not pay them for a couple months and then last minute run down and pay them before they were going to send a guy out to turn you off. So that's really what they're trying to accomplish here. You're going to see lots and lots of coins. For example, there are already organizations like the Crypto Society, which is creating an environment of a membership like a Costco or Sam's or something. Uh-huh. You can buy goods and services internally, and they have their own internal Crypto Society token, which is not a coin or security. It's an actual token. It's just like a green stamp or anything else that the merchants that sell inside the society can take for goods and services. That keeps the money in the ecosystem. It's like using a script at Disneyland. You're keeping the money inside the park by using that script because that's what you're paying for, and the merchants take it, and they actually can control that universe of money. But also in this program, people are a member, and as long as another member is in there, it could be in any country, you can transfer funds to that person instantaneously. You don't need permission anymore. There's no intermediary. There's no third party. The concept you need to understand is that when you use a Bitcoin, the actual use of the Bitcoin is settlement. You know what I mean by settlement?
Settlement.
Sure, absolutely.
Third party validation.
Right.
I think they're already testing that. I noticed my bank offered me the opportunity to participate in something. I want to call it Zello, but I'm not sure. But I assumed
Venmo.
Pardon me.
There's Venmo, Square, a whole bunch of these that are going on right now.
Yeah. Well, this is Wells Fargo,
something like.
And I was thinking that it might be a way for me to transfer money to people where I don't have an account set up to where I can use online banking, so that it does become a ubiquitous spending. It becomes like coins, like money that I can spend at any place I want to spend it, basically.
Right. Well, see, Bitcoin is convertible into any currency right now. So if you hold a Bitcoin, you want to convert it into Chinese yuan, you can. You want to convert it into Russian rubles, you can. It eliminates border problems completely. And like if you're in one of these membership organizations like this, you don't need any KYC. The company is KYC'd itself, and all the transactions are internal to the company system. So if I want to send money from me to a relative in another country, I can instantaneously transfer that money. So all these guys lining up at Walmart to send money down to their family in Mexico, $28 billion. Well, once they join the organization, it costs very little to join. You get the internal wallet, and now you can just transfer your funds to your family down there, and it's done and over. And
yeah. This whole world is really very interesting, John. But I think, would you agree? I think we would agree that the government, especially the United States government, and probably governments around the world too, most of them, if they can't control it, they don't want it to exist. In other words, the system you described with Bitcoin, for instance, is something that, it's since it's peer-to-peer, and everything is direct, decentralized. If they can't control it, they certainly would want to get rid of it. So I think what they're trying to do is build a system, huh?
But they can't.
Well, if it's centralized,
for example, if it's centralized, it's going to be owned by somebody. That means there's a point of failure.
And that's the point. Yes, and that's the point of. But I don't think they care about the point of failure. Is what I'm getting at. Anyway.
Well, the point of failure is what we concern, what we call, so the government can intervene. See, you can't do that. For example, if I wanted to hire a mechanic to come work on my vehicle, I can pay him in Bitcoin simply by transferring Bitcoins that I have on a hardware, like a USB dongle.
Well, listen, I got to wrap this up, unfortunately. We'll have to discuss it a little more at a later time because I got the bottom of the hour break and I got a few more things to get to. But listen, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. We'll be back, folks.
Where the spooks go to find out what's really going on. This is Govern America.
All right, we're back. This is Govern America. I'm going to dispense with the music in the interest of time. I'm sure we'll get back to the digital currency, the cryptocurrency thing at a later date. This certainly isn't something that's going away, probably ever, I'm sure. Anyway,
it's a very interesting subject.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion, and I would love to have continued with it. However, there are some things I did want to get into a little bit of this about this protest in Michigan. For one thing, we went to the Capitol. Was it Thursday? I think it was Thursday, and there was already a crowd gathered there, Vicky, and they were. It was rainy. It was a very bad weather out. As a matter of fact, I streamed most of it. I spent over 5 hours there, I think, 4.5 of which are on Periscope. I just about live streamed the whole thing. You can get up to that periscope.tv/governamerica for anybody that wants to watch the protest. All of the protest is there, including toward the end, we went inside the Capitol. And they were having a session there. The House of Representatives was deliberating on some bills, one of which would strip Governor Gretchen-Whitmer of her emergency powers. And they also authorized a lawsuit against her if she continues with this, doing this stuff to the people of the state of Michigan. Now, out there in the just outside the door. So we all went to the door of the chamber, which was locked, and they had posted state police there to make sure that nobody goes into the chamber. Although a few were in the chamber, and they were armed, and they made, later on, the leftists and the liberals and the media made a big deal out of that. But what was amazing to me is seeing the turnout, number one. All of these people in the pouring rain, and it was pouring at times. I was standing out there in the rain without an umbrella. My daughter had one, and mostly I didn't use the umbrella until I got worried about my phone getting so soaking wet that I was afraid it was going to damage the circuitry, and so I got under her umbrella with her. But it was pouring rain, and you had all these people, and in the distance there were cars honking. It was really kind of an amazing atmosphere how dedicated these people were in the pouring rain. And then, but they're desperate. That's the whole point. And so eventually we went into the Capitol, as I said, toward the end, and the state police. There was a line of state police there who took our temperature. They pointed this temperature gun at our head, took our temperature, and then let us in. And we went in to the doors that lead to the chamber of the State House of Representatives, and there was noise. We chanted, and in fact, one of the things that they said right off the bat was, "Let us in." And it goes on. That's about half of what I recorded there. The point is they just kept yelling, "Let us in, let us in," and other things as well. And there were people there with rifles. There were people that were open carrying. But it was a peaceful protest. I found out later that there was one person that was arrested. So I come home Thursday after this is over, and after they had done what they were going to do. I take a nap, and I wake up, and I see trending on Twitter, Michigan terrorists. Michigan terrorists. And apparently there is this, here's how this whole thing was covered. This was the kicker on the Rachel Maddow show.
So there were protesters again today at the Michigan State Capitol, a whole bunch of them armed. In a state that just reported another 119 coronavirus deaths in the past 24 hours.
Again, a statistic that's completely meaningless, by the way.
These protesters were demanding, with their guns, that the governor should get rid of the state's stay-at-home order. Republicans in the Michigan legislature are making plans to try to sue the governor to achieve the same thing. But during the debate over that today, the view from the Senate floor was of these pro-Trump protesters denouncing Governor Gretchen-Whitmer, bearing their...
Okay, first of all, how do we know they were all pro-Trump? Because I'm not pro-Trump. But see, she throws that in there. Okay.
Long guns inside the Capitol building.
Guns.
State Senator Dana Polhanke tweeting today, quote, directly above me, men with rifles yelling at us. Some of my colleagues who own bulletproof vests are wearing them. I have never appreciated our sergeants at arms more than today.
So this legislator tweeted out, they got guns. We're wearing bulletproof vests here. So this meme was floated that people of Michigan, that these armed militia people, these armed militants storm the Capitol and force their way in. I mean, this is the kind of nonsense that was being put forth by the leftists and the media. So
I saw one report that said there were swastikas.
Well, I don't know. I didn't see any. They were also saying,
I didn't see any in the image they had.
Confederate flag. As a matter of fact, they have one legislator has introduced a bill, and I've not seen it, but I heard about it. So this is hearsay. But supposedly they introduced a bill to ban like things like swastikas and things like that, which I'm against. I'm against ban. Folks, that's free speech. I don't have to agree with it, but it's free speech. You should be able to have whatever symbols you want, because that's an expression of your speech. And by the same token, somebody should be able to. The answer to wrong speech is more speech. You know, somebody can counter what you say with what they say. But banning symbols, banning anything that expresses what you're trying to get across is a violation. It is a shutting down of debate that should not be taking place and would not in a free country. But just to debunk a little of this, here's Michigan Representative Jack O'Malley commenting on how threatened he felt.
There was a group of people there yesterday that it's a protest, right? It's not a church choir meeting. So yeah, there were some people there who had flags and banners that might have made somebody upset who didn't agree with them. But they were overall, as a protest goes, very peaceful, right? So at 12:15, they allowed 250 of the protesters into the Capitol. They were asked to take a health screening, which they all did. So now if we got a bunch of mean ass rebels coming into the Capitol who want to kick some butt, they stood there and let the state police take their temperature. That is an orderly group. Okay. So then they get into the rotunda. And, you know, they're again, this isn't the church choir. This is a group of protesters. So they start chanting. And there's one picture of the state cop standing there with a guy screaming. Well, if you snap a picture of a guy screaming, that's what you're going to get. And who knows what he was saying, right? The point is they were orderly. They were protesters. So they're not going to be quiet. They're going to protest. And then one of my Senate colleagues on the Democratic side tweets out a picture. There's men with guns in the gallery. I am so glad that we have sergeants at arms. Some of my members are wearing flak jackets. Well, first of all, they were open carrying. They were doing it legally. There have been guns shown in protests like that in the past. Nothing happened. So if you want to fan the flames, go ahead. But they were constitutionally correct. Even the state police said, hey, you're allowed to carry a firearm. I'll tell you what, I carry a firearm into the House of Representatives every day. You know why? Because it's my constitutional right, and I have the legal papers to do so. So here's what I say. They made some noise. I heard them chanting during our debate. It added to the ambiance. They were fine. They didn't do anything. They didn't push cops. They didn't try and storm the door. So I think anybody who wants to say they were out of place or doing anything wrong, they are just trying to fan the flames, or they're thick, because those people were doing everything they wanted. And when it was over, I walked out amongst them. They were quiet, happy. I chatted with a couple of them, and you know what else? There was not one piece of paper, no mess on the lawn. They were clean. They left peacefully. So I call BS on that one.
You don't think it was over the top, some of the...
No, it wasn't over the top. It's a protest. You know, people in protests, I'll tell you what, let's just say, because those folks were more on the right side of things. I have seen protests with people on the left. And you know what they do? They chant and they sing and they yell. That's what you do at a protest like that. So if somebody was shocked by their behavior, they haven't seen protests. So BS on anybody who says they were out of line.
One other thing that you're going to say something?
No, I like that guy.
Yeah, my wife does too. In fact, she's the reason why I found that. It was her that she came across that originally. He also commented on how the legislature's relationship with the governor has deteriorated, and I thought people would find this interesting as well.
When all of this started, we were with the governor. Hey, we've got emergency powers. We're in a situation. Let's go behind, and she can make, with emergency powers, she can make some quicker movements than, say, the legislature by way of statute and debate and all of that. And we were with her until that second executive order and stay-at-home order came out. At that point, prior to that, the governor was actually listening to the legislature. We were able to give input. She adapted some of her poorly written executive orders with input that we had that helped clarify some of those orders. Because, David, those early executive orders, they were terribly written. They were so vague. And so the House of Representatives, we presented her many rewrites, and she adopted them. So then the second stay-at-home order came out. And I can tell you from that moment on, she stopped listening to the legislature. I know it because I had the doors closed in my face. So now, last I remember, we had at three branches of government, legislative, executive, and judicial. Well, right now we've got one. And so what we've been trying to do is say, Madam Governor, listen to us, talk to us. We need to be part of this. You know, the House of Representatives, the People's House. And she has shut us down. So we have tried to reach out to her, and she's given us the hand. Now, then you throw into this, we're at the end of the executive order here the other night. And on Wednesday, her office leaks private emails between her and the Senate Majority Leader on how we're trying to compromise. Basically, she thumbed her nose at us. And so we say we cannot have one person running the state. That's not how the founding fathers set it up. And so yesterday we voted to not extend her powers. She, of course, and we've also got that issue with the 45 and 76. And, I believe we're going to have to go to the referees. I think the judicial branch is going to have to decide who has the powers here. But I can tell you, and anybody who comes to me and says I'm not telling the truth, I will fight back. As of that second order, she stopped listening to the legislature. Doors closed. And that isn't right.
So, it's just like we have been saying all along here. There's definitely a power struggle going on. And she is definitely... And by the way, I'm focusing on Michigan at the moment, but this is the case across the country. These governors are acting in this manner. And I'm wondering if the reason why they're so emboldened is because they have been reassured from higher up that there's not going to be any repercussions for their actions. You were going to say?
Yeah, we have a problem in Idaho in that we have a part-time legislature. So I'm not sure. I know that the governor can call them back in an emergency session, but if they're out of session, I don't know if they can bring themselves back.
I'll bet they can.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but we have had some pushback by public officials, but not nearly enough. As a matter of fact, I've come to the conclusion that Idaho might be a red state in terms of people who claim to be conservatives and Republicans, but I don't think we are. I think this is a blue state, blue as you can get.
Well, we're all getting pretty blue in another way, but I did want to focus a little bit on California as well, because, as we said, a lot of states have been pushing back, at least the people have, against tyrannical government and the lockdown orders. California threatened, we mentioned last week, they threatened to arrest people and has banned people from appearing on state property to protest. They've effectively tried to prevent people from petitioning government for redress of grievances. But that hasn't stopped the people. I was very happy to see that there's a freedom movement in California. There's a group called Freedom Angels, for example. They've been busy organizing protests. Here are some snippets that I recorded off of their live Facebook stream last Sunday night as they protested in San Diego.
No new normal. 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 No new normal.
It's the freedom to peaceably assemble and petition your government for the redress of grievances. So please let us know, for all those comfortable on the couch right now collecting a paycheck. Good for you. But what about the 22 million that don't have that opportunity? What about all the small businesses that don't have access to the funding that supposedly is out there? It's a loan. It is not free money, because nothing is free. And if the economy continues to be plummeted into the gutter, they will never be able to pay that loan back, those small business owners. And then guess who owns the business? The state.
Part of the conversion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Government take. Well, you know what? To do business.
To do what?
I said to do business with China, and China owns a percentage of the corporations. The only way to compete with them is to do the same thing, and I think that that's what our government is doing. They are converting our economy over to be one to match China's.
Yeah, exactly. Now, there was more to that, a lot more to that clip, but I want to, in the interest of time, move on, because there's one other thing about California, and they referenced it in that clip. There's this woman she's facing actually 6 months in jail right now, because during that protest they were wearing T-shirts and they were chanting, "We are Naomi, we are Naomi." And that woman had alluded to the fact that officials are doing, what they're doing to protest organizers. Naomi Soria, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce it. She faces several months in jail. I think she said 6 months so far, and it could mount to even more. And literally thousands of dollars in fines because she dared to protest the lockdown and organize the protests. They're trying to they're persecuting this woman for basically, organizing people and for appearing at these protests.
Well, they're going to end up paying her
outrageous.
some money because it's a constitutional right to be able to peacefully assemble.
Well, not according to the California government. Here's Naomi Soria, in her own words, talking about her ordeal.
I planned an event called the Freedom Rally, and it was last weekend on Saturday. We met downtown at the Hall of Justice. There was about maybe 400 or 500 people in attendance. I asked everybody to wear red, white, and blue and bring their American flags and their protest signs, and just things to make some noise, a drum, a tambourine. Some guy came with a cowbell. Everyone was dressed so patriotic. We had the police there, and they were across the street. They kept their distance. They let us have our protest. They pulled me up to the side a few times, and they let me know about the health commissioner's orders and that they weren't going to be pursuing legal action at that moment, but that didn't mean that they wouldn't be pursuing legal action in the future. everything went great with the protests. We didn't have anything bad happen, no weird outbursts or weird situations. We had one side of the street closed off for traffic for people who wanted to do a gridlock, and then like I don't know what to call it. It was a gridlock. And then on the other side, we had traffic that could flow freely, like emergency vehicles and everything. So we weren't blocking traffic. And people went around in circles around the building, and they honked their horns super loud, and they had their American flags, and they were cheering, and everyone was just, happy, and it was just a great time to be alive. So the protest went well and ended about 3:00. Fast forward to, I left to Sacramento 2 days later, went to do another protest at the state capitol. That one went amazing. There were thousands that showed up for the same reason. Then the following morning, I received a phone call from SVPD, a detective and a lieutenant, letting me know that they decided that they were going to be filing charges and going to the city attorney's office and issuing paperwork for a warrant. So I I contacted Mark Muser, and he got on the phone call with me right away. And he talked with them, and he let me know that he was going to reach out to Centers for American Liberty, which is a nonprofit, and they wound up taking my case and my cause. So now I'm represented by Mark Muser and Harmeet Dylan from the Dylan Law Group. And I have had an outpouring of support, and I have the best legal representation out there. So basically, they let me know that it's 90 days in jail and or $1,000 fine. And for every protest that I decide to do will be another 90 days and another $1,000 fine and or both. So right now I'm looking at...
No, go ahead.
I'm looking at 6 months in jail and to $2,000 fine.
May I ask what they charged you with? Illegally protesting? I mean, what is the charge?
No. Going against health commissioner's orders. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but a health commissioner is an elected official. So there is no law.
This is nothing short of tyrannical. And it's but what was really nice about this is seeing the fact that they're still out there. That Sunday protest, the chants from which, and there were horns and everything else. It was amazing to see. I will put that protest in the show notes for people to watch the video, because it's nice to see that there is a thriving movement in California for freedom. There's a lot of patriots. We make jokes about California, but it's nice to know that there are still a lot of patriots living there. Meanwhile, a judge overturned Illinois Governor Pritzker's executive order, and now he's flipping out.
A circuit court in Clay County, Illinois, ruled against Governor Pritzker's stay-at-home order, calling it unconstitutional. House Republican Darren Bailey filed that lawsuit after the governor extended his emergency powers beyond 30 days. The state argued that the law allows the governor to renew his emergency powers every 30 days if he declares a disaster. The governor's office says he intends to appeal the ruling. Today's ruling technically only releases Bailey from that executive order, but it does open the door for anyone else in the state to file a lawsuit.
And then we go to Missouri. The governor there was announcing his phased reopen plans when he was interrupted by a protester.
Our top story this evening, protesters shouted at Governor Mike Parson to reopen the state immediately as he was announcing his plan to reopen Missouri in phases.
The demonstrators believe the state overreacted with its response to COVID-19.
We now can cautiously and wisely begin to reopen Missouri.
Governor Parson continued his briefing, explaining the first stage of his plan, which he calls Show Me Strong Recovery. He says the next phase will still include the reopening of businesses with social distancing requirements.
Yeah, Missouri is the Show Me state, so Show Me Strong Recovery. A little play on words there. But it's nice to see the American people pushing back against these tyrannical state governments, but it's interesting to me that all of them are kind of doing the same thing for the most part. And that indicates that things are being coordinated elsewhere. But and the oppression is deep, Vicky. I've got articles here. There's an article here in the Blaze, which churches ordered no singing during live stream services unless they're in homes California County COVID-19 restrictions say. So this particular county ordered the churches not to sing because, singing you might spread coronavirus. I mean, this is how insane it's gotten. No singing, no stringed instruments. Yet Planned Parenthood's still open. Go figure. You can murder your children, but you can't sing worship songs. In the waning moments of the broadcast, I want to put on the map for people. I do not support the Convention of States. I want to make that clear. And this website I'm about to give you was set up by the Convention of States. Okay? The reason I'm giving it to you, though, is there is an event calendar on this website which people need to be aware of, because there's a lot of these protests, they're at least coming down on the right side of pushing back against these executive orders. So with that caveat, I want to say there's openthestates.com. Again, I don't endorse the underlying organization, but I do encourage you to take a look at the event calendar on this website. You just go there and click on event calendar, and a lot of the protests that are being organized appear there. Did you have any closing comments, Vicky?
Yeah, that's a very interesting thing. I wonder if that's part of the equation for the lockdown. I wanted to say that, but I also wanted to say that they know that most people don't have $500 in the bank to handle emergencies. So what did they think was going to happen with people who are at the very lowest end of the income scale when their income is just suddenly cut off? They know how much trouble these people are in.
Yeah.
And maybe they're trying to whip up a revolution. Who knows,
Well, I think that there's certainly, it could very well be a test to see how strongly people respond, what they can get away with. But I am happy to see people push back. I don't think it's a fool's errand to push back. I think that...
No, I don't either. I think it's very important.
What are you going to do? Let them get away with it unchallenged? I mean, it's completely vital to make your voice be heard on this issue. And thank God, we have people doing just that. And there's the positive note we're ending on. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being with us. Join us back here next week, and please tell everybody that you know about the broadcast, and we'll be here, God willing. In the meantime, pray for this republic. Do what you can to restore it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, Vicky.
Thank you.
All right.
Have a nice weekend, everybody.
Bye-bye.